At 3:14 a.m. on January 14, 1945, the village of Herrlisheim was a tomb of frozen stone, jagged shadows, and the iron scent of blood. SS Obersturmführer Klaus Richter felt like a god of the wasteland. He led 14 of the Third Reich's finest, battle-hardened men of the 10th SS Panzer Division Franzberg. They moved with the silent, predatory arrogance of soldiers who knew the Americans were retreating, shivering, and broken. Richter's boots clicked rhythmically against the cobblestones of a narrow passage known as the Butcher's Corridor. He checked his P-38 holster, adjusted his wool collar, and felt completely untouchable. In the next 40 seconds, Richter and his entire patrol would be dead. 30 feet above them, wedged between the charred rafters of a ruined tannery, Corporal Elias Thorne sat in a pool of frozen grease and chemical stench. He wasn't holding a grenade, he wasn't manning a machine gun. He was holding a stopwatch and a Springfield M1903 with a 2.5x Weaver scope. What Thorne had done to the floor below was a violation of every standing order in the 3rd Infantry Division. His commanding officer had called it unmilitary. His sergeant had called it a coward's trick. This event would flip doctrine on its head, proving that when the field manual fails, civilian logic wins. Before the draft board sent him a letter, Elias Thorne spent 10 hours a day in a cramped basement in Paterson, New Jersey. He was a second-generation cobbler, a man who spoke the language of leather, tacks, and adhesives. While other men studied sports or politics, Elias studied anatomy, specifically the way a human foot rolls from heel to toe. He understood the physics of friction and the chemical bond of industrial adhesives. He spent years working with black Mastiff bitumen, a viscous industrial-grade tar glue used for heavy-duty boot soles. He knew that if you mixed it with a specific ratio of toluene and pine resin, it didn't just stick, it became an inseparable part of the surface it touched. When he enlisted, his instructors at Fort Bragg were baffled. Thorne didn't care about marching discipline. He spent his free time in the reconnaissance tent studying photos of German Marschstiefel, the iconic iron-studded jackboots. He wasn't looking at the soldiers, he was looking at the cleat patterns. They saw a distracted tinkerer with dirt under his fingernails. They failed to see a man who knew exactly how to make a human being a permanent vertical fixture of the landscape. The tactical problem was a 50-yard stretch of the Butcher's Corridor. It was the only way to reach the German-held ammunition dump, but it was a fatal funnel. A German MG-42 team was nested in a hardened bunker at the far end, creating a crossfire that turned the cobblestones into a meat grinder. Standard Army doctrine dictated a frontal assault with smoke cover. It was a suicide mission written in ink by men who weren't there. Private Leo Rossi, 19, from Brooklyn. He died 3 days ago trying to sprint the gap. He left behind a hand-carved violin in his locker and a mother who would never hear him play again. Sergeant Hank Miller, 24, of Ohio, he was shredded by crossfire while trying to lob a satchel charge. He had a photo of a 6-month-old daughter in his helmet, a daughter who would hold that blood-stained letter for the next 60 years. Captain Sterling, a man with a West Point pedigree and a uniform that stayed suspiciously clean, refused to deviate from the text. "We follow the manual, Corporal," he snapped, his voice echoing in the hollowed-out command post. "I will not have my men using voodoo chemistry and improvised garbage. You use the tools the Army gave you, or you face a court-martial for insubordination." Thorne didn't listen. He had observed a flaw the West Point strategists missed. The corridor had a slight 3-degree downward incline toward the German bunker. The stone was non-porous and cold. That night, Thorne went rogue. Under the shroud of a winter fog, he dragged 4 canisters of stolen industrial bitumen and a quick-setting resin he'd scavenged from a bombed-out chemical warehouse. He didn't just pour it. He applied it in a 20-foot kill slot, calculated to the exact stride length of a jogging soldier. He knew the cold would keep the mixture thick, but the kinetic heat and pressure of a human step would trigger a partial flash set. He was turning the floor into a horizontal flytrap. Working in total silence, a ghost in the dark, Thorne prepared for a mission with zero support. He was gambling his life, not just on the enemy, but on his own side's hunger for a scapegoat. The air smelled of fermented grain and acrid coal tar. Thorne's breath came in shallow, frosted plumes. His finger rested lightly on the trigger. He heard them, the rhythmic thwack slide of the SS patrol. Richter entered the zone first. The technical precision was absolute. Richter took 3 steps into the resin. On the 4th, his heel didn't lift. He pulled. The anatomy of the stride meant his momentum carried his torso forward while his foot remained anchored to the stone. He stumbled. Behind him, 3 more men stepped into the black Mastiff trap. The sound was sickening, the tearing of leather and the wet slap of men hitting the ground. They weren't just stuck, they were fused. The more they struggled, the more the adhesive coated their gloves, knees, and equipment. The untouchable elite were suddenly statues in a dark hall. Thorne looked through the scope. The angle was a perfect 43 degrees downward. Thorne didn't hesitate. He exhaled halfway, held, squeezed. The Springfield kicked. 1. Richter's head snapped back. 2. The radio operator collapsed, his legs still vertical, his torso folded. 3, 4, 5. It was a mechanical harvest. Short, staccato barks of the 30-06. The Germans screamed, reaching for holsters they couldn't draw, their bodies anchored to the earth by the very boots that were supposed to carry them to victory. 30 seconds, 14 targets, 0 return fire. By dawn, the ammunition dump was in American hands. Thorne had saved an estimated 200 lives that would have been lost in a conventional assault. The Army eventually studied the incident. Within a year, area denial adhesives were quietly entered into experimental doctrine, but Thorne's name was scrubbed from the report. Captain Sterling took a Bronze Star for superior tactical positioning and initiative. Thorne was simply given a formal reprimand for misappropriating chemical supplies and sent back to the front. When the war ended, Elias Thorne didn't attend the parades. He went back to Patterson. He put on his leather apron, picked up his hammer, and went back to the shop. He spent the rest of his life fixing heels and soles for neighbors who never knew why he winced every time he opened a fresh jar of rubber cement. He didn't want the credit. He didn't want the medals. He had cows to milk and shoes to mend. The butcher's corridor was just another day at the office. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories.